to this production, which is going to be called Elements of an Assessment Plan. This is part of a series of workshops conducted by the Office of Assessment, in which we try to educate the university community on how assessment works, and particularly the process of assessment. Everyone sort of knows the word, but everyone around campus, they tend to have different meanings within different audiences. So the rationale for these workshops is to help have sort of a common definition, a common construction of what it is we're trying to do. In particular, these workshops function to promote a culture of assessment here at Kane. And by culture of assessment, it essentially is something that has been required by middle states, but this is just a nice way of saying that we become a learning institution, that we have a way of reflecting on the work that we do, measuring the work that we do, and then making systematic and ongoing improvements. During this workshop, the purpose is to help with putting together an assessment plan. An assessment plan is exactly what it means. Assessment plan means you have a purposeful action in what you're doing and scheduled activities. So in other words, you're not just going to do ad hoc problems. Too many times when you don't have an assessment plan, you only take on projects when troubles arise or when there are problems. So in other words, you're always fixing problems. It's a reactive process when you don't have assessment in place. When you have assessment, your plans in place, your work is much more measured, it's systemic, and it's ongoing. And so having these plans produce much more healthier outcomes, and it helps you make sense of what it is you're trying to do. Know the essential elements of an assessment plan. Understand the assessment cycle. I cannot stress this enough. Assessment is a cycle. That means it's ongoing and continuous. It means that, for example, whenever you do assessment activities, and oftentimes I train individuals in different departments and different disciplines on assessment, they'll ask the question, are we done? Well, guess what? In an ongoing plan, you're never done. It is always ongoing. You have to continue to work on something. Now, the trick to assessment is that the plans themselves must be simple. They should not be distracting from the work that you do. It should not be onerous. So that's the magic here. It needs to be something that's valuable enough to help you understand what students are learning, what they can do upon the time of graduation. But it shouldn't be so cumbersome and difficult that suddenly someone who could be producing more in relative to teaching effectiveness and scholarship is suddenly having to code surveys for 6 weeks at a time. That really isn't what we're trying to do. Understanding this assessment cycle is important, and how to make it functional for each department. We're going to talk a little bit about developing a mission statement, although I hope you do have one by now. And we're going to talk about having an active assessment plan. That means you're moving words from on paper to in action. But before I get started, I always have to do this because, frankly, this is necessary. There are way too many misconceptions when it comes to assessment. Too many people fear the word. They think it's encroachment of some sort of external bureaucracy. There's way too many myths, and I'm just here to sort of correct the record. So let's get on with it. I hear this a lot. Our program is working well. We don't need to bother. Well, guess what? Maybe your program is working well, but if you don't have evidence, how can you prove it? Your opinion of your program can have some value, but you must show evidence. I mean, we work in higher education that is all about empirical methods. You need to prove to me, and prove to your internal and external constituents and to your students that your program is working well. I often hear this: we will assign one faculty member to do assessment. That's the wrong approach. Assessment is everyone's activity. If you start pointing fingers, hey, you're the assessment person, that's the wrong way to do it. Everyone has stake in this particular game. Now, certainly there can be a lead person, a liaison, someone that facilitates, that's fine. But the idea that a department can simply point to one person and say, you're the assessment person, that's probably not a sustainable system. And that's another thing I want to get to also. Every system that gets created in this next era of assessment for Kane University must be sustainable. They must last beyond individuals and so forth. This has to be a culture shift, a generational change. Assessment is not an other activity. It is a part of your general activities of which we do. I often hear this one too. Some level of fear. The administration might use the results to eliminate programs. If you believe that the results you produce will eliminate programs, that is a fundamental misrepresentation of what goes on in assessment. Assessment is about proving that you're successful. And if for some reason within the assessment cycle you figure out that students aren't reaching some objective or perhaps a course isn't working as well as possible, the assessment cycle allows you to make those corrections. Assessment is about ongoing and continuous improvement. It's not about shutting down programs. Now, having said that, when programs get shut down, it's usually not for assessment purposes. They get shut down because they don't have students. That's different. That's another issue. That's another slide production. But as far as what students are learning, showing and demonstrating that they have professional competencies, that they're ready to succeed, I want to make sure that I fight all of these perceptions when it comes to what assessment isn't. So a lot of times I hear some version of assessment is a fad. Assessment's not a fad. Assessment is about today's era of accountability. What is going to happen isn't less assessment activities coming forward from here on. You're probably going to see more. And rather, in today's construct, you get to create your own assessment activities to measure how it is you're being successful. If we don't do this correctly, I want to stress this, if we don't do this correctly, over time, some external, maybe federal bureaucracy will tell us what we should be doing. So I would rather we demonstrate our success in good faith today than deal with those consequences later. Okay, so I often hear some sort of assessment is a waste of time and does not benefit students. I don't even this type of argument is almost too foolish to even respond to. Okay? Assessment is always useful. Even if when you complete the assessment cycle, you find that students are still as successful. Well, guess what? That means you proved what it is you say. So in other words, you're not just giving me an opinion. I walk up the individuals and I say, well, how's your program doing? And everyone can tell me a story. That's nice. I like stories. Like the next person. Having said that, you need to move from stories to data. Data is proof. Stories are entertaining. Assessment sounds good, but it is too time consuming and complex. I can assure you, if you're doing assessment that is too time consuming and complex, that means you're doing it wrong. The modern literature on assessment has clear themes. It's about empowerment of faculty and administration. It's about usability of data. It's about simplicity. Making sure that you triangulate those three factors when it comes to assessment. So we need to deal with these misconceptions. Assessment's not going away. 5 years from now, assessment won't disappear. It will still be here. It's part of what we do. And so really, really think about that as we move forward.